Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show to talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dexter New Blood. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up with the Deb and Dexter conversation, or more so, Dexter's subconscious manifesting itself as Deb, and talking about, why would he lie? Why would Kurt lie about talking to Matt? Is he so distraught? It's like, no, it could be him trying to get the case closed, because that way he gets to, she kind of paces it out saying like, okay, so maybe he's trying to get the case open and shut so that people will stop looking, because he thinks that Johnny might have killed his son in the process, because it's like, Matt ended up killing this deer on Seneca land, so he thinks Johnny might have killed him because of that. And Angela, he sees her as someone who is going to protect the Seneca people, so that it's like, she is protecting them. So if he removes her from the equation, means you can get to Johnny. And it's like, all right. And then even Deb's like, not the worst situation. He's like, and Dexter's like, what could be worse? And I liked how they did that. I don't know if that was just a digital thing of just like having a hand wipe over it and just digitally removing the marks, or was it just like, whether they just like it looks like it was just them showing the same scene, they just rewound it. I think they just did it in reverse is what I mean. Either way, I'm not the most technical person. I'm always like still mystified by movie magic, because it's still a mystery to me to some extent from a production standpoint, but I still think I don't know, I just like the whole just getting rid of the X, getting rid of the jail marks on Kurt. And it's like, or he could be, looking into you, and everything leads directly to you, his son's actual killer. So that's definitely interesting. What I thought was really incredible is like the main crux of this episode revolving around Harrison, because everything seems good. He's got a friend and everything. I even love that thing where Dexter was like, because he's like, because Harrison's like, yeah, they're a bunch of fuck nuggets. It's like, fuck nuggets. That's, and Deb would say that all. He's like, yeah. He's like, I remember her being fun. He doesn't remember a lot, but he's like, I mainly remember the swears. And it's like, he's like, and he talks to Dexter's like, oh, do you miss her? And he's like, I think about her. She's on my mind all the time. And I think it's really sweet because you see like Deb nearby just smiling, looking at like, oh, I'm thinking about you too, buddy. And I think it's a really sweet thing. But he goes off with Ethan. It's like, oh, they're pretty tight. But at school, he's listening to Molly's podcast, true crime podcast. And I was like, oh, at first, I was like, who's he going to scroll across? Because at first I thought he was going to come across the Bay Harbor Butcher. Still could potentially end up coming up later on. And then we stop on the freaking Trinity. I was like, yeah. That's the thing. I'm like, is that his only appearance in the show? Because that's the casting thing I saw. Like, I saw his name, John Lithgow. I'm wondering if it's just that picture, or will he manifest himself in a different form later on? Like, will he be in Dexter's head or something like that? I'm curious. Is that the only thing we're going to get? But the moment we saw him, I was like, yeah. And he's listening to the podcast, and he skips to the end about the Trinity Killer's final victim. And it's like talking about how effed up that kid must be, sitting in your own mom's blood and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, I think I'd actually let that slip my mind. Like, I completely forgot about that. He was in his mom's blood. It's like, oh yeah, like you're definitely like your dad did. And your dad was born, him and his brother were kind of born in their mom's blood. And, the cycle kind of repeats. So, and then everything went down at the school. And at first I was like, and Ethan literally pulled the trigger on his plan to hurt people. Because Harrison kind of co-signed it just by being fine and okay with it. But then it turns out Harrison actually saved the day. Because the moment Ethan got wheeled out, I was like, why is he hurt? What happened? Did someone, what happened there? And it turns out and Harrison starts telling us, the moment he starts talking, you can tell Dexter's looking at the blood. You can tell immediately it didn't make sense to him. But I'm like, the way Harrison's talking, I'm like, you're lying out. You're lying. Why are you lying? What did you do? And, but yeah, he starts getting praised as this hero. But once again, Dexter being who he is, even he says, like, right, can't turn off the forensic brain. And even Deb is like, what are you doing? Stop questioning. Because at first she's like, he's exactly opposite of you. Like, how can you ever connect with your son when your son is actually a hero? He's empathetic. He's personable. Everything that you aren't. So how could you ever fully connect with your son? And I guess that did play a role in why Dexter did everything he did, trying to expose the truth. I mean, because, like, for one, his brain is just wired that way. But it's like, he's like, definitely just something is off. And Deb is like, no, the thing that's off is you, because it's like the inconsistency with his story. It's like, yeah, people aren't going to remember everything. People, unlike there are people like you who are kind of like, you know, very good at being meticulous and stuff like that. It comes second nature to you being the killer that you are. But normal people are going to flub on some of the details and get some stuff wrong, especially when it's something traumatic like that. But then, like, he was even at the police station and he looked at everything and he was just thinking, like, things seemed off. You know, and even Harrison tried to go visit Ethan, like, oh, everything was going to be copacetic, everything was fine. It's like, oh, like, you know, if when Ethan gets better, it's like, oh, you think we're going to stay in this town? We can't stay in Iron Lake anymore. We're getting death threats. Like, you should have come to us. It didn't even have to come to this, like, because now their son is known as this mash, like, oh, he was going to kill a lot of people. He was going to start, like, I mean, because the police did find his book, and I guess that was going to help fit the narrative Harrison was going to create anyway, because he already knew, like, he makes it seem later on like, oh, I had no idea that Ethan was going to do what he was going to do. It's like, you did. He literally showed you his book and everything, and you were fine with it. But at the end of it all, it's just like, man, the sad thing is he thought he could keep his friend after this, because at the end of the day, like, other than Audrey, like, he doesn't really, there's no other, like, real, because Audrey's in that space of, like, right, you're the girl I like, so it's not really friend status. Ethan was, like, the only friend he had, like, you know, but for whatever reason, he thought, like, oh, everything would be okay. Like, how did you think things were going to work out? Did you really think that things were going to work out? Like, because he was going to wake up and tell the truth, which he does, but no one believes him. I mean, literally all the evidence is stacked against him, and it's like, right, like, you made the perfect patsy, because it makes it seem like, oh, you're going to lie your way out of this, like you weren't going to do anything. You planned stuff out. The guns at his house were his dad's, so I wonder why. I guess Audrey was one of those people, because, like, she wasn't a part of it, but she was still tight with the guys that bullied him. So I guess it's like, right, you ignored me, you never helped me either. So you're just as much you're an accomplice to this. So just as much as I was, but, like, obviously, like, his family can't stay here. It's like, right, Ethan might have to go to juvie for this, which even his dad was like, his mom's upset, understandably, but you did the right thing. It's a good thing that you did. A lot more people could be hurt, but you can never come around us again. You understand? And then Harrison has that look on his face, almost like, I did the right thing, like, almost like, how dare you, like, get pissed at me, your son was, but that's also, like, the thing, that's why I'm like, I think he was just playing the role. Either he's gotten really good at faking it, I mean, because either he just got a little bit more of his mom in him than he does Dexter, maybe Hannah rubbed off on him, to some extent, but it's like, I don't know whether he did that because he's like, right, this is the thing you're supposed to do. Like, because it almost does seem like on some level, like, he does seem like he might be Dexter 2.0. Like, this is supposed to be Dexter 2.0, but, like, Harrison might be, like, a more evolved monster than his dad was. Like, his dad had to fake it, and Dexter did, but we as the audience could tell, like, oh, he was faking it. But now it's like, with Harrison, it's like, it's hard to say whether that's genuine or not, like, or whether he's just playing the role people expect him to play. Like, he doesn't, like, people calling him a hero and everything, he kind of leans into it while also not leaning into it. He just kind of is like, no, I'm not a hero. But I'm like, I'm just not quite sure what he wanted from the situation, what he expected the end result to be. I guess it's like it was a spur of the moment thing, and then it's just kind of like, wow, I gotta cover my bases after I've already kind of slipped up. Kind of like your dad. His dad literally screwed up with the Matt thing. It's like, cool, now I gotta figure this whole situation out. And, you know, it wasn't the planned kill that it normally is for him. So I think the same thing applies, because he wasn't trying to kill Ethan, he just wanted to hurt Ethan, and Dexter kind of figures it out later on. I love that he's kind of, you know, checking out the crime scene and stuff like that, and Deb's telling him to stop looking, that you're crazy. The only reason why you want to look is because you just want to prove that you want to make it so that you want him to be the monster like you, that so that you can connect. And it turns out that does seem to be the case. And I love that she's like, right, you've always had a little bit of that hero complex. You want to be like treated like a hero. And then like all these multiple Debs are holding up signs being like, yay, Dexter, like, hey, congratulations, you're our hero, Dexter. And then all the fanfare is falling down. He's got a little thing in his mouth. And it's so, once again, I love what they're doing with that. I love how they've evolved that. And even just like the whole thing of like, he's like, no, we need to figure out what's going on. And so, like, Deb is just so, like, sick of him and just stabs him to fit the motive. And it's like, yep, the blood spatter would be here if he just straight up stabbed Harrison. So how do we recreate that? And he'd go, like, you would think he would feel bad about fictitiously, like, wounding his sister. And so, like, as she was, like, walking away, being like, I'm not going to be a part of this, he cuts her leg, and the blood drip is where Ethan was. So it's like, now it explains. Ethan was leaving, and Harrison slashed him and then stabbed himself. And then even Deb's like, why would he do that? And Dexter leaned down to know what it felt like. And like, he needed to know. Especially because I'm wondering, like, would that have happened if he hadn't listened to that podcast? If he hadn't come across that, like, would that have never happened, or would something eventually have triggered him to do something of that nature? Probably even worse. I mean, he's testing the water. I mean, it's just like Dexter killing animals first before he eventually escalated to people. So maybe this is kind of his animals. It's like, right, I'm gonna wound someone. Because even Dexter was saying, like, right, him doing this, it's actually, to some extent, it's kind of like the code. Because, you know, after everything, like, Harrison was like, right, how do you deal with something like this? And Dexter was like, I wrap people up and I kill them. He's like, he's like, honestly, I don't know. He couldn't help, because he didn't want to really tell Harrison his way of dealing with things, because that's not the copacetic way to deal with things. But now it's like, right, the fact is he went after someone who could have hurt a lot of people. Granted, Dexter usually gets to people after they've done a lot of stuff or try to stop them from doing more stuff. But this is a situation where Harrison kind of cut it off at the path that, once again, Ethan fit the position of someone who could have been like a school shooter type of situation, you know? So I also think it's interesting, and maybe this speaks volumes about Audrey too, that Audrey's a little messed up. I mean, because like she ended up taking a picture of, like, when it was like when Ethan had his list, Audrey took a picture of it. I'm like, why would you want to keep that? She's like, if I was going to be a victim, I have a right to know. And she took a picture of it. I'm like, why would you do that? I'm wondering what that's going to turn out to be. But like I said, Harrison at the school, like, everyone was celebrating him, like, yeah, because it's like, you know, Logan was like, yeah, if you need, like, someone to talk to and everything, then, like, you know, we will provide people that you can talk to after something traumatic like that. And the people on the football team are like, yeah, celebrating Harrison, because it's like, right, you're the guy who stopped everything, and, you know, you stopped Ethan. But then he put out there that, like, no, you guys bullied, you beat him up, and, like, you made his life a living hell. And at the end of the day, like, I don't agree with what Ethan was going to do. Like, you know, luckily no one got hurt, you know. And what started, because they were like, huh, except for Ethan, ha ha ha. But it was like, yeah, you guys created this situation, and saying, like, Ethan's just as much of a victim in this, because he actually legitimately, because he knows it's true. Like, if Ethan ever did anything, it would be because he was pushed to. Doesn't justify it, but it is a point of understanding. Like, if he ever did anything, it's because they made his life a hell. And it's like, you know. So, in the grand scheme of things, I guess you could make the argument, maybe now that his parents are aware, at least in this fashion, and, you know, he didn't do anything, maybe he wouldn't have, but there's still the likelihood he probably would have, you know. But it kind of all got cut off from before it went too far anyway. And now his parents are more aware that he has those thoughts and proclivities. You know, maybe he'll be able to have a fresh start somewhere. And I'm sure a lot of this is going to leave its own scars, both physically and, you know, both literally and metaphorically, in a physical and mental and emotional sense. Because because he's like, no, like, Harrison slashed me, and he's like, I don't remember anything past that because I passed out. So once again, no one's going to believe him because of the evidence stacked against him. So, and even because it's interesting, because it makes Harrison come off compassionate, and even Dexter, because Angela's like, right, you might want a lawyer, civil suit. He's like, no, everything that Ethan and his family's going through, I don't want to add more fuel to the fire. And she's like, wow, like, you are very compassionate. You're a good person, Dexter. You can't help but laugh a little. You're like, ha, you have no idea. And the fact is that Dexter is only doing that because he knows, like, Ethan didn't start anything. Harrison did. But So it's a complicated situation, especially when Dexter's looking for the blade and he finds a razor blade, and it's like, right, just like Dexter slices people to pieces because of what happened to his mom, that Harrison used a razor blade because it's like, right, born in blood, and Deb is like heartbroken by it, but then you see Dexter almost smirk because it's like, my son, he has a dark passenger too. So we're not that different. It's like, the sad thing is, you were hoping, like, you didn't want this for your son, but now that you know, like, wait, he's going through this, I can teach him, we can be in this together. Once again, he was almost trying to fill that void multiple times before of having someone close to him that he'd be able to connect to with this. Like, obviously we saw like what he was sit Deb over the edge and what that did. So he lost the only person who understood who and what he was and how he was evolving and changing at the end, but had to go back to being the monster that he was because of everything. But like I said, he always filled that void a little bit, but now knowing like, right, I can connect to my son on this. Because it's interesting because, well, once again, Kurt's trying to like hide the fact is that he trying to pretend like he's talking about, which at first you're like, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. You're covering something up, like, because Deb's theory, well, Deb/Dexter's theory of like he's just trying to go after the person himself. There was other stuff that made me think that wasn't the case, because I pointed it out last episode when he was like, "Yo, I don't want that." When he found out Angela was going to expand the search to the cave, it's just like, it's interesting because Angela does think it's off because the moment she heard from Jim, but when she heard from Dexter being like, oh yeah, like he was celebratory, that's how I found out about it, and Angela was almost like, wait, what? And it's like, I've called his phone multiple times, like, oh, he's on a bender, blah 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 blah. It's like, there's definitely something there. So it could be applicable, it could be both. It could be like he's pumping for information, find out what happened to Matt, while also having a secret of his own to hide. So he could be like juggling two things at once. Like, both situations can be true and applicable to this circumstance. Because even Molly came to Angela and is like, oh, I don't want a reporter here. She's like, no, not a reporter, a podcaster, Prentice's dad, which... Because I was trying to think, I was like, what was the most recent thing I seen Jamie Chung in? At first I was about to say, was it... The Gifted, but it was like, no, more recently it was Lovecraft Country. But I feel like there was something before Lovecraft Country that I saw her in, and I just can't place what it was off the top of my head. But the reason why I went also on that tangent was because, like, her saying reporter, I was like, oh, that's funny. Because if you've never seen Gotham, she played, I believe the character's name was Valerie Vale. I think she was essentially, they never really clarified it, but I think she's supposed to be Vicky Vale's mom. That's how I chalked it up to, because she was the Vale, but her name was Valerie, so, because she got introduced in season 3. Of Gotham, but yeah, that's what I thought was interesting. It's like, oh, you're a podcaster, but you played a reporter before in that form. I don't know, like, I'm thinking too much about it, but it just, like, I'm overthinking it, but it just, I thought that was interesting, because that was immediately what popped in my head. I was like, you're a reporter in a different life, or rather different role. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Once again, I overthink that type of stuff, drawing connections where there isn't really one to be made. I just thought it was interesting, but even Molly thought it was kind of a little weird of like, like, she's like, I've tried calling Matt, like, no, because obviously Angela's not like happy about her being here asking so many questions, but Molly does prove herself to be very useful, because one of the women on Angela's missing board is someone that, because of her 800,000 armchair detective and sleuths, they were able to find the lady. She's still alive. She ran away from home because of her circumstances, but she's alive and well. And Angela's like, oh, I must be crazy. But Molly's like, no, you're not crazy. Like, I had the same thing for 3 other women on your board. And it's like, nope, they definitely are missing. There's no trace of them anywhere. So there is something going on here. And we finally get, we kind of understand, because I don't think I talked about it last episode, but they did reference the Iris situation, and now we get full context for what it is. Iris disappeared, and most people thought she just ran away, but Angela always felt like there was more to it, but she's the only one that kept looking. And so she wanted, as a cop, she wanted to speak for those victims who people were just like, oh, that person ran away, yada yada yada, and not looking further than that. There's so many women, especially like, indigenous women, that have disappeared that no one's looking for, and she wants to speak for them. So Molly's going to help her. It's like, right, I'm gonna do my thing, but you also, work the case in close proximity. So tell me everything that you figured out. I mean, granted, the last thing you want is, that's the whole point, like, the last thing you want is a crime podcaster here asking all these questions, because even Angela had thrown it out there to Kurt about, like, was he hurt? Because the evidence proved that he was hurt. It's like, oh, I couldn't couldn't tell. But once again, came up with the excuse of him being on a bender and stuff. And you're like, there's something there. I also thought it was interesting, like, him showing up, being like, oh, I want to reward Harrison for being the hero of the town. I got him a drone and everything. I was like, that's a little weird. But I was like, oh, you're taking an interest in Harrison because he's not the fuck-up that your son is? And, but Dexter, like, slipped and made a mistake and was kind of, because, like, Kurt was beating himself up. He's like, yeah, like, it's on my son, he's a fuck up because, like, I failed him in some shape or form. It's like, yeah, if your kid screws up in some shape or form, like, you can't help but feel like it's your fault, which even Dexter's like, fuck, because what he said did get to him, but also because he's like, he's fishing because Dexter accidentally, he's like, yeah, because of what happened on the boat. He's like, what happened on the boat? My son wasn't driving. He's like, yeah, I know that. It's like, well, how do you know that? It's like, yeah, Esther at the police station talks. He's like, oh, and what did they say? That your son wasn't driving, that, he was, teenagers do. He wasn't a teenager. And Dexter's like, oh, I didn't know that on the inside of his head. I knew that. It's like, yeah, he's trying to, like, swerve it to make it seem like he didn't know more, but, like, less he knows about it. But it's like, Kurt's fishing. Like, I slipped up. I took the bait, and he knows something. Like, so, like I said, Deb was right to some extent. He is trying to figure out what happened to his son. He's not letting it go, even though he has an excuses for it. So, he's looking through all that stuff about Matt, and he's like, he knows his son's potentially dead, considering what's happening. But he goes to that Chloe girl. He offered her money, and he's like, I want to give you a job. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then we see that the hunter, we got like who I kept being like, oh, it's Edward. It's just definitely seemed like it's Edward. It's like, oh no, it's Kurt. I was like, well, in the grand scheme of things, you got Clancy Brown, so of course he's going to be like the John Lithgow, who's the Trinity killer. It's supposed to be the equivalency to this. So I'm sure all the missing women are obviously tied to this. They're people that he killed. And once again, I brought this up last time too. The cave that Dexter found that she wanted to. That Angela was saying, like, oh, we were going to extend the search there. I felt like that had to be a dumping ground, but we don't know. Like, because Dexter threw a rock down there. I thought you would have heard, like, the thud of a body. So I'm wondering, are the bodies down there somewhere? Dexter just happened to just hit the ground or something. Because we have no idea where else they're buried, but it's like Kurt's behind it. Granted, Edward could be too. This could be a thing of a VIP's type of situation. I'll kind of leave it at that, except a lot more hands-on than a VIP situation. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But I was curious, like, not unless they're both in this together. I guess the whole operation could just be Kurt's, not unless Kurt, like, lines them up and then, like, Edward takes the shot type of thing. I don't know. They could be a duo in their own regard, or maybe it is just purely Kurt. So it's interesting to know that he's, at the very least, if not solely responsible, at least potentially partnered up who's part of this, or at the very least a part of it. So that's definitely interesting. And like I said, like the moment he hung up with Angela last episode or whatever, it was like, she's like, oh, he's like, wait, you're expanding to the caves? It's like, he got nervous then. It's like, you're about to find my dump site. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. A lot of really, really interesting things. I'm excited to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I mean, now that Dexter knows what he knows, what is he going to say to Harrison? How will he broach the conversation about, like, cool, what's inside of you? Like, I was the same way. Is he going to open up and be like, right, what happened to Rita? What happened to your mom? Happened to me too. What didn't just happen to you? It happened to your brother as well. But, so, because I don't think he knows about that. Yeah, I don't think he knows about Dexter's brother. It was Rudy, right? It's been, like I said, it's been so long since I've seen the original season. Like I said, the only one I watched before this was season 8 because it was the only one I never saw. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out going forward to the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.